And welcome to the OLLI at SBU lecture series, the winter lecture series. Today we have Jeff Hollander and Diane Hollander and Larry Fine. They've all been OLLI members and they are current workshop leaders. And we're going to get right started with Jeff and Diane starting us off.
Okay. Hello and welcome. We are so happy to have you all with us for a journey back in time to a magical place that virtually no longer exists. Today, we're going to do our best to tell you almost everything you wanted to know about the Catskills, and we welcome comments and chats to be discussed at the end of the presentation. But we're going to start off today with some historical background from the turn of the century that may surprise you and carry you through to the present time. Before we start, we want to give a special thanks to Liz, Roseanne, and as always, Larry, for helping us out today. And we are honored to have as our special guest, Sam Laurie, who will tell us about the upcoming new Catskills Museum in Ellenville, New York, later in the program. So as you will see, we have a lot to show you today. But Jeff and I decided to put a personal spin on how our story began. And it went something like this. We met in 1963.
At the Pine Grove Hotel in Cahonkson, New York.
I was at the teenage table.
I was her waiter.
I hardly ate a thing.
She hardly tipped a thing.
We actually went on a double date to Tamarack Lodge.
I went with another girl. She went with another guy.
We weren't interested in each other at all.
But then...
2 years later, I came back.
And so did I.
Now I was a counselor.
I was still a waiter.
He was actually my parents' waiter, and they loved him. My father, because...
I said, Mo, the menu is yours. Order everything and anything.
And my mother, because...
I think she either liked my Southern accent or the fact that I was going to law school in the fall.
We were married in 1967.
And it's been a wonderful 56 plus years ever since.
And for the rest of my mom's life, she told everyone that she found him. And I think she did. So with that, Jeff, let's go to the Catskills.
Okay, before we get there, though, we want you to watch a very fun, whimsical video. And in this, we're going to see some New Zealanders doing klezmer music, somewhat like a Fiddler on the Roof type tunes. And you'll even notice almost a shout out to the fiddler with the bugler on the mountain. Keep an eye out for that. But more importantly, the accordion player is the husband of the singer. And his family owned until the end the old great Raleigh Hotel in Fallsburg. And you're going to be watching during this cartoonish part for the iconic hotel postcards or signs going up on the Quickway Route 17. And also some of the activities that were typical of a first-class Borscht Belt resort. So let's take a look at it.
Very catchy tune.
Get in the car, 'cause we're gonna leave the city. We're driving to the Catskills, through the Palisades so pretty. We're going to the mountains, to a big resort hotel. We're booked into the Raleigh, where they know us very well. Up in the Borscht Belt, can we get there faster, please? It's the cats with jammers. It's the real bee's knees. Up in the Borscht Belt, with the other families, on vacation in the country, in the lazy summer breeze. Oh, the dining room is our favorite venue, and we'd really like to live there, try everything on the menu. Al Shiner is our waiter, and he's fast with every course. And if you don't feel like the chicken soup, you can always order borscht. Up in the Borscht Belt, can we say hello? the country. In the lazy summer breeze. In the evening, we can wander to and fro. We can listen to the house band, stay on and watch the show. We can catch a new comedian who might become a star. Sip a pink flamingo or dance the cha-cha-cha. Up in the Borscht Belt, can we stay up later? Please, it's the cat's pajamas. It's the real bee's knees. Up in the Borscht Belt with the other families. On vacation in the country. In the lazy summer breeze. It's the last day, and we'll soon be back in the city. Take a deep breath of the fresh air, 'cause we're going where it's gritty. It's sad that we are leaving, but our cup is really full. So it's one last time on the tennis course, one more dip in the swimming pool. Up in the Borscht Belt, can we all come back here, please? It's the cat's pajamas. It's the real bee's knees. Up in the Borscht Belt with the other families. On vacation in the country. In the lazy summer breeze. The lazy summer breeze. In the lazy summer breeze.
So who would believe that it would all be gone? But the nostalgia of that time stays with us. The Catskills is a feeling, this special place in our hearts, and it never leaves. Everything about it was amazing. Even the drive up itself was an adventure. If you drove to the mountains, you had to stop at the Red Apple Rest. It was the most famous halfway mark in Tuxedo, New York, which opened in 1931. We loved seeing the signs along the road. 10 miles ahead, 4 miles to go, 500, and then the last one, 200 feet to the Red Apple. Actually, that's when you also started to see all the signs for all those wonderful hotels once you pass that halfway point. For my family, the Red Apple was more than a food and bathroom convenience stop. It was a tradition. For me, the best French fries anywhere. Looking at all the cars in the parking lot, they pretty much all looked the same. They were loaded with stuff. If you were going to a luxury hotel, you had to bring a fabulous wardrobe, many, many changes of outfits, many, many suitcases. And if you had a mink stole, you brought it with you because it was cold at night. The bungalow colony cars were very easy to spot. They had everything in them but the kitchen sink, and they all had to go with you because after all, it would be your home away from home for the entire summer. So why is this so important to us? Well, for me, my dad grew up on the Lower East Side with a group of friends so close that their friendship lasted a lifetime. Every summer from the time I was a baby, we went to the bungalow colonies with this fabulous group of friends. They took over the entire place, so you knew everyone. It was just wonderful. And in those days, comedians didn't come to entertain there. They were the comedians. They made their own entertainment. They had talent shows, softball games, fabulous costume parties. We even had a beauty contest at the pool with all the other bungalow colonies in the area. And my mother won as Mrs. Sullivan County, making us all very proud. They also played practical jokes on one another. One morning we woke up and our kitchen table and chairs were on the roof of the bungalow. So my father had only one way to handle that. And we were all up there having breakfast on the roof with everyone cheering us on. So it was just a fun summer. Of course, the dads all went back to work to the city during the week and came up only on the weekends. For the kids, we would get an old pot and sent to the blueberry bushes to see who could fill the pot first. The next day, all the kitchens were strong with the smell of blueberry everything. The moms had time to go see the vendors that came regularly to the bungalow colony, selling everything from pickles and knishes to all kinds of women's clothing. And of course, there was that famous bakery truck. As we got older, my parents decided they needed to change, and now they were ready to go to a hotel and relax a little bit. So first we went to a hotel called Lesser Lodge, and then we went to the Pine Grove Hotel in Cohonson. I was a guest there for many, many summers, and I loved it so much that it became harder and harder to leave after our 2-week stay, until I became old enough to work there. A job at the hotel for the entire summer, that was my dream come true.
Well, you know, her story is so interesting, but mine was totally different. I was raised in the Old South. I never spent the Borscht Belt summer with my parents. However, I sometimes visited my grandmother and her siblings who owned the High Mountain Hotel in Swan Lake. These Eastern European women were the true kosher kitchen chefs, the heart and soul of the early Catskills, old world to the core. No culinary school training could compare. But by high school, I outgrew it, and I moved on to my cousin's livelier Granite Sunshine Hotel in Cohonson, New York. They actually had a band and nightlife. What more could an adolescent want? Then I learned my skills as a waiter, but sadly they decided to sell it after 1962 and bought Ye Waverly Inn in the West Village, which became an extremely successful venture for them. However, by then too, just as an aside, the old world kosher chefs that I'd left at my grandmother's hotel were becoming less and less in the Catskill hotels that we thought still had these old world Jewish people in the kitchen. So when I went to the Pine Grove in '63, it was thanks to a friend I'd worked with at my cousin's hotel. And I went back in 1965, but because the guests were dropping off slightly, there were layoffs. I was the last in, I was the first out. What did I do? I lived in North Carolina. I had to do a survival effort for about 5 weeks to keep seeing Diane before I went back to UNC. No agency that I got in touch with cared that I was a good waiter or not. All they were interested in was, do you have a car? And I did. And I could be anywhere, which I was. So off I went to places that you might have heard of, like Gilbert's, Hansville, the Homowack. I was a car and a bellhop there, and if I stripped your gears parking your car, I apologize belatedly. Then I worked at Chate's, a most diverse hotel in Accord, New York. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but they had a complete range of guests in all lifestyles and range and races. So this was an eye-opener for a guy who lived in the South. And then, last but certainly not least, I wound up at Peg Leg Bates Country Club in Upper Cohonson. You may say to yourself, I think I know the name, but what in the world is he talking about? Well, I was probably the first white waiter at America's largest Black-owned and operated resort at that time in history. Clayton Peg Leg Bates was a world-class celebrity tap dancer with about 22 appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show. He even played with the command performance before Queen Elizabeth. It was a very busy weekday crowd, but on the weekends, he brought up dozens and dozens of busloads from Philadelphia to New York City. The nightclub featured probably the best Black jazz musicians and singing talent in the era. Diane would come over and we would be treated very well. He was always so gracious to us both. Now, I always wondered, being this was the civil rights era and a lot of turmoil in the country, how people would send a note home and say, guess who came to serve me my dinner? I was not your typical Black resort waiter. But I was well received and I really enjoyed my experience. And I thank him so much, for the opportunity to stay up in the mountains. We didn't really know at the time, was a great civic leader and a humanitarian who had portions of Route 209, which oddly enough runs through the Ellenville area that we'll talk about later, renamed for him upon his death. We never appreciated this historic man and the event in our lives until we thought about it many years later. So visiting top resorts even later, and when we got married and with our children, there was always something missing, something we couldn't quite feel the same about. But the Catskills were the Catskills and certainly was a great part of our life. And they take you to not the Raleigh Hotel, not Kutcher's, not Grossinger's or the Concord, but actually where it all sort of began to take a turn for the better. And it was at the Loomis, not country club, but sanatorium. So let's take a look at this through the eyes of Barry Lewis and John Conway, historian, because they're going to let us know why this and the tuberculosis plague that was hitting New York around the turn of the century in the early 1900s was instrumental in getting a jump start to the area that had long been neglected.
Hi, I'm Barry Lewis, and welcome to our journey through the Catskills, as we will take a walking tour, a history of Sullivan County and the places that made this the tourist mecca of the world. And as always, with me will be Sullivan County historian and noted author John Conway. And John, when we talk about the county, talk about the Catskills, people think tourism. They'd expect us probably to start at the Concord or Grossinger's or one of the more noted places of the hotel industry. But really, as you and I both know, the history of the Catskills and the tourism begins not at a hotel, but what's right behind us, a hospital.
Yes, Barry, we're at the Loomis Sanitarium or Sanatorium, depending on what era you're from. Loomis opened in 1896. It was among the most famous tuberculosis sanitariums in the country. It played a major role in the end of what we call today the Silver Age being from 1890 to 1915, and the beginning of the Golden Age from 1940 to 1965, the so-called Borscht Belt era.
And Loomis, as we're talking about, is named after
Dr. Alfred Loomis, who was really responsible for revolutionizing the way tuberculosis was treated in this country, spent very little time here in Sullivan County. He was really a proponent of sending folks to the Adirondacks for their cure. But he worked in New York City, and the Adirondacks were a very long and arduous journey from the city, and he was looking for a place that would give him the same kind of climatological treatment that the Adirondacks provided, but closer to the city.
he has a master plan, but he doesn't actually see his plan come to light.
No, he doesn't. He buys this property in 1894. Sadly, in January of 1895, he's stricken with pneumonia. He suffered from tuberculosis himself. That was a death sentence for someone with that disease. And his sister-in-law, Mary M. Irvin, picks up the mantle and raises the money from people like J.P. Morgan and other famous rich Americans. Morgan, by the way, was one of Loomis's patients, and they fund the construction of this sanitarium.
And not just a sanitarium, but an entire village.
Eventually it grows into a village of some 800 acres. It had its own fire department, its own post office, its own telegraph office, water and sewer, all self-contained. This building here was the Babbitt Memorial Laboratory. That actually opened in 1912. This was the library, the Edson Aldrich Library, built around 1900 and designed by an architect from New Jersey by the name of Fred Wesley Wentworth.
And it looks like Monticello, Jefferson's home. Really, it looks like money was no problem in terms of building some beautiful facilities here.
Well, again, some of the wealthiest Americans were funding the Loomis Sanitarium. And I think the idea was to provide something that was non-clinical for the patients. Now, this building actually opened 100 years ago, 1908. And at one time during the sanitarium's 50 years of operation, this entire area was covered by flowers. The flowers were tended by the patients, and that was all part of the treatment regimen.
Be outside, work outside, feel better.
They were urged to spend as much time as possible in the outdoors.
John, we're walking on the golf course.
This was the fairway for the Loomis Golf Course, which operated for a number of years in the early 1900s, and patients were encouraged to play as much as they were physically able.
How does it end, and how does this connect to what we know as the mecca of tourism in the county?
Well, really in two ways, Barry. We have the Silver Age and the Golden Age, and the point is that the Golden Age could not have happened, certainly would not have happened the way we know it happened, if not for the Silver Age, and Loomis was the bridge, as we said earlier. Loomis effectively ended the Silver Age because of the stigma of treating tuberculosis in Liberty. All of the hotels began to suffer. People did not want to travel on the train or to vacation in areas where there were tuberculosis patients.
Loomis begins to fall on hard times. The steady flow of donation money dries up. By 1938, it's really struggling, and by 1942, Loomis closes, which causes a domino effect.
All of those hotels that were struggling went up for sale. And these Jewish immigrants who were desperate to get out of the Lower East Side of New York began to buy up this property because the Sullivan County area had the reputation as the place to go. Fresh air, clean water.
So people knew to come here, the buildings were here, there was a desire to come here, and that's where we...
Absolutely, and that's how the tumblers clicked into place to create the Golden Age.
And next time, we'll continue that Golden Age. For John Conway, I'm Barry Lewis, taking a tour, the history of Sullivan County.
So we see that the Catskills are starting to come into their own, but what are we talking about in relation to what the conditions were on the Lower East Side? Let's take a look at some slides that'll put it more into a true perspective of what life was like. And while you're thinking about the Silver Age and the Golden Age, if you've been watching this series, The Gilded Age, it's probably a good time to think around that turn of the century also, and those people and how they viewed immigrants.
Yes.
You know, they looked down on almost everybody that wasn't in their class of Newport or Saratoga. So let's pick up the slides now and take a look at them. Okay, you heard them talk about people wanting to get out of the Lower East Side. Well, this is how living conditions were. People were making a living, but look how they were living. They had money to go on vacation and get some fresh air and maybe some decent food and some space, because they, as well as their children in the next slide, were having difficulty finding places that would be enjoyable. I mean, how do you play a game of stickball with clothes hanging over you? This was not, I was not from the stickball group, but even I know this is not an ideal ballpark. So what happened is they started looking around. Maybe I'll go to Coney Island, the resorts, or Saratoga or Newport. Let's look at the next slide and see the welcoming committee. Okay, pretty much this is the type of signage you saw all up and down the East Coast, even in some parts of Miami Beach. They didn't really want Jews, they didn't want Italians, they didn't want Irish, they certainly didn't want blacks. And to make us maybe feel not so bad, they also didn't want dogs. Let's go to the next one. Now, I talked earlier about my grandmother and her siblings who owned a hotel up in the White Lake, Swan Lake border. This property gave to the Jewish community for people that really didn't want to have to drive to either Liberty or Monticello on the Sabbath, a piece of land, which was the end of their property, and this shul was built, which is a synagogue. And it's still, I believe it's still there today because the hotel has been long gone since the mid, probably 1950s, but this was a picture taken in 2000, so apparently it was slightly updated and has been kept going indefinitely. So it's a nice thing that they gave. Like I said, they gave them the land, but the building itself was done by the various members of the congregation. Next slide, please. This was the Pine Grove Hotel,
The famous hotel.
where it all began. Not the Concord, not Grossinger's, but it still stands today, believe it or not. It's been a dude ranch, and now it's a
Of course,
religious
my
group.
mother saved the brochure.
Yeah.
That was hers.
Okay, the next one is that infamous dining room where I first served my future wife, and I also, in the upper right-hand corner, served her parents. And
So
what was missing?
I have have to tell you, what this picture doesn't show you are the many walls of floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out on the most magnificent view of the mountains. It was really, really beautiful. And most of the waiters that were in the dining room were all kids, college kids from the New York area. But Jeff, being from North Carolina, he was like a novelty. And he was quickly given the nickname South, which everybody called him South. And he didn't have a heavy Southern accent, but you knew he was definitely not from Brooklyn.
I think my tips went south too, because they probably figured I'm from North Carolina. I don't have the same cost of living issues. If just quickly though, before we leave this, if you look at the table, obviously it's a Sabbath meal, probably the Friday night dinner. It's preset. You're getting a piece of grapefruit with maraschino cherry, and all the things are on the table. But one thing that you can see actually, if you look at the pickles and the other things, those are called livestock. And in terminology for a kitchen person and for a dining person, these things were savable if possible. And we used to bring them back in the kitchen.
Not good today.
I don't know if they'd ever pass the Board of Health standards, but if you left,
You don't want to know the things that they say.
if you left butter in that dish, it was coming back in another life tomorrow. Anyway, let's move on to the next one.
Well, that was the Catskills.
Okay. Anyway, here were the three of the most iconic resorts of all. And sadly, they went in descending order out. Grossingers closed in 86, Concord in the late 90s, and Kutcher's lasted until Helen Kutcher passed away about 2013. And I believe it closed the same year or no later than the next year. They pretty much kept it open for her, but you're going to meet her a little bit in several of our videos. Let's go to the next one. We got a couple more. This is a good example of the menus. And what's significant about this, Di?
Well, these are both lunch menus, and everything on both of them is absolutely delicious. And I wish I could go right now and order everything. But if you look at the menus, the one from Grossinger's, all of their menus, they had a special artist on staff who sketched. I mean, if you really look at those pictures, they're unbelievable. And the dinner menu, which we happen to have one, is
got more than one.
It's just so beautiful. It's both sides have pictures on them, drawings, and just the level of the difference in quality of the menus from Grossinger's to the Concord. The food was the same, but the menus.
I don't know. I think the food was still a little better at Grossinger's until it wasn't. And as we said earlier too, by now the kitchens were being manned by people that were not. They probably got a copy of the Jenny Grossinger cookbook and figured out how to make the. Yeah, it was fine. Okay, let's move on. Next one, please. So here is just a cross section of some of the entertainers. You could probably recognize many of the faces, especially if you get a little closer to the screen. Who's missing is Barbara Streisand, who was in that little article at the bottom, the Concord data. And she was a special guest that was coming and was appearing on Broadway then. Sammy Davis was on Broadway with his show. And this was just typical of them. Now, multiply that by all the other top resorts, and it was a constant showcase of the best talent in America. And finally, the last one. Many videos and movies have been made about it. We're going to be using When Comedy Went to School at times today. Welcome to Kutcher's is another great one. Catskills on Broadway. And the movies, Dirty Dancing, Mr. Saturday Night, Sweet Lorraine, and missing is Walk on the Moon, about the bungalow colonies
and the bungalow bunnies.
And also Mrs. Maisel. Diane was talking earlier about you had to wear a lot of nice stuff if you went to a fancy, where she went was, we'll talk about that afterwards, but she certainly dressed to the nines.
Yep.
You thought she was going to Grossinger's or the Concord. Okay, with that, let's move on. I mentioned before about When Comedy Went to School, and Robert Klein put together a documentary on PBS. And we're going to look at the earliest pioneers, like going to Grossinger's. They started pouring in as vacationers. And the important thing to remember is the Catskills had something for everyone. If you were rich, you could go totally first class. If you were dirt poor, well, I shouldn't say dirt poor. If you were poor, you could go to what met your budget. And there was
It's a
everything.
great time.
Yes, and that's the interesting thing. Many of you sent us notes in advance of our class, and were telling us, I didn't even know how poor I was, but when we went and we enjoyed, we had no idea there was something better.
Right,
And we had a wonderful time in spite of it.
exactly.
Other people, went and just went to bungalow colonies and never went to a hotel.
Mhm.
And we didn't go to the top hotels until we were married, and we went to either conferences or on our own, but it was a totally different world,
Different experience.
but it didn't make it any better. It
Right.
just was fancier. So let's take a look at that video, the first part.
Here, in the Catskill Mountains, specifically Sullivan and Ulster counties, families sought the pleasures of country life away from compressed city living and unhealthful conditions. They didn't have manual skills and barely spoke English. They frequently lacked money. But what they didn't lack was the courage and drive to succeed. Selig and Malky were typical. In 1914, after laboring in sweatshops for years, they somehow scraped together $450 and bought a broken-down Catskill farmhouse, grandly named Longbrook Farm. Out of necessity, they took in a boarder, then another. By the end of that first summer, they actually turned a profit of $81. Now, they were in the hospitality business. Their last name was Grossinger.
As every travel agent knows, a vacation means different things to different people.
Mr. Ellis, we're going on a vacation together, and we'd like you to help us.
Someplace not too expensive.
Yes.
I think I can fix you up at a place where you'll meet a few congenial young men. How would you like that?
Oh,
That sounds good.
swell.
I see.
We're gonna hitchhike up to the Catskills. We know the highway, Route 17. We're gonna hitchhike up to the mountains, up to the finest resort we have seen. Moist to shake, to tame, on Villiers, holiday on Catskill
I vaguely remember the first trip that took at least 8 hours. We took a train.
She'll be coming around the Catskills when she comes. When she comes. She'll be coming around the Catskills when she comes. When she comes.
They added an engine to the train so it can get up the hills. When you went through tunnels and everything, by the time you reached the destination, you were covered with soot.
Resorts were constructed by mostly Eastern European Jews. The bungalows, cottages, and hotel communities flourished, providing new, exciting, diverse venues. A new breeding ground, a kosher, fertile crescent, where Jewish-American comedy was nurtured.
I feel so good. I just got back from a pleasure trip. I took my mother-in-law to the airport.
Vaudeville was dying, burlesque was dying, and so these same people came into the Catskills and they started to create. They created the writing, they created the sketches.
We did a sketch, a comedy sketch, and then we wound up with a song and a dance.
Okay, thank you. So they're coming in, things are happening. I just also want to mention that as the opportunities came to buy these resorts, sometimes at very low and very attractive prices, also Irish and Italian settlers came out of the city. Also, these immigrant groups were looking for an escape to the countryside, which was common to many of them that came over, from other countries before they got to America and lived in the very crowded conditions of New York City. But Barry Lewis now is going to take us back to the Catskills in a moment, and we're going to be looking at his dad, who was a tumbler or a activities director at one of the several of the hotels. And Barry talks about a word schlocky in reference to, a hotel not being so fancy, not so great. It's in the eyes of the beholder. Some people belonged to those hotels and had a wonderful time. It wasn't fancy, didn't always make it better. Sometimes it made it very stuffy, very uncomfortable, and very, very unwelcoming to some people. So whether your hotel was super fancy or not, it really didn't matter.
There was something for everyone.
Absolutely. There was all sizes and all classes.
Right.
And this particular video is the second that we're going to use of a 6-part classic Catskills group on YouTube. And you may want to share that with, family and friends at some point. It's Barry Lewis who put them together. So let's take a look and let's see how he kept memories alive and how he met his wife there too, and how he's always been living now in the Catskills ever since.
Person who's been fortunate enough to live and breathe this classic Catskills. I was one of those city kids who came up every summer. My father worked at small places, schlocky places as we used to call them, the Shady Nook Country Club in Loch Chodrake, nicer places like the Flagler Hotel. We stayed at bungalow colonies like Breezy Corners, and eventually he worked at the Stevens O Country Club in Swan Lake, a year-round resort. But every summer we used to come up, we made the trip. The Red Apple Rest was the one and only stop, and then we came up to the Catskills. The whole family was in the car, mom, dad smoking in the front, windows open, sort of like a Turkish bath with all the smoke coming in. That was our trip to the Catskills. We knew when we hit the Palisades, we saw the green, we knew we were near the mountains. When we hit the Red Apple Rest, we really knew we were there. Thank God for the Red Apple Rest and all those bathrooms that were open 24 hours a day. And then we hit the Catskill Mountains. And for a city kid, I was very lucky. That's what my summers were like. And my first introduction to the Catskills, probably from the time I was an infant. My father was a tumbler, an MC. He was one of the guys who cut his teeth in the entertainment business, like so many others. When I was 17 years old, I was working as a busboy and later a waiter at the Shady Nook, place where my father started. My family moved up, and he worked at the Stevensville. So I went from being someone who went up in the summertime to someone who was here year-round. And I became very lucky because about 12 years ago, my family who has been living in Sullivan County, I got to work here at the Times-Herald-Record and cover these Catskill Mountains and write about it and be able to, in a certain way, try to tell this story. So it's an amazing area. You try to explain to people that this area has a population of about 75,000 year-round, but in the summer it triples. And for a period of time, there used to be 900 resorts, and then there were bungalow colonies. And in the olden days, we had things that we called hookah lanes, that were basically these kitchens that everybody ate at. And all these hotel stories are pretty much the same. We had people from Eastern Europe came over here. They wanted a better life, so they left the tenements of the city. They come up to the Catskills. They want to be farmers, and they find out that, like so many other people, this is not exactly what you call great farmland. But if you have cows, you're okay, and you can do corn, and you can do apples, and other stuff like that. And so they would have these small boarding houses in which they would use the food from the land, the eggs, the milk, other products, and they would serve their guests. And the guests loved it, and why wouldn't they? The fresh air, close to the city, but just far enough away, the water, it's everything that makes the Catskills special. And these boarding houses, these people who ran them, they realized, we've got something here. And so the boarding houses began to grow. And those who were able to turned 20-room boarding houses into like Grossingers, 1,200 room resorts. We're able to tell you these stories, and we're going to do it through their voices. You're going to see the hotels. You're going to see what they were like in the heyday. You're going to see what they look like today. It's classic Catskills, and if
Okay, by the way, Barry talked about the Stevensville Hotel. It just so happens that both our parents had their honeymoons at the Stevensville. In those days, that was the place to have your honeymoon. You know, with all that's offered at the hotels, all the food, entertainment, activities, one of the greatest features for parents was the all-day day camp. Not only were your children taken care of during the day, but they were dropped off for their meals at the children's dining room so that the parents could leisurely have their fabulous meals in peace. The children's dining room now became my world as a counselor. I was very lucky because I love children, but when you're at a table with 20 kids and you have to cut up everyone's food 3 meals a day, it was exhausting. The children's menu was very different than the main dining room, but I had a special connection and trying to win me over and a chance to say hello during the day, Jeff Hollander brought me a covered dish surprise every day for lunch and dinner from the main dining room. When he showed up at these meals as my own personal waiter, all the counselors would swoon, "Here he is." Well, it definitely worked, and I felt very special and very lucky. But there was something else about being a counselor that I didn't expect. All the counselors had to take turns doing night patrol. The parents signed their child up, left their door to their room unlocked, went to the nightclub for hours. Can you imagine leaving your child? I had a clipboard with a list of names, room numbers, and a flashlight. Wow. Walking around the grounds late at night in the dark, blocks away from the nightclub, opening doors and looking at children with a flashlight. I was scared. By the time I finished, it was time to do it again and then again. Plus, you know, we had no cell phones. And I know it was a different time, but unimaginable in today's world that we would ever do such a thing. But in those days, that's the way it was. So now we're going to take a look at some of the great resorts led by iconic families, but also the rising entertainers that found their way to these famous resorts. So Larry, let's take a look.
The new Manischewitz American motto.
Brooklyn and the Bronx were the home for so many entertainers, guests, and hotel staff.
Growing up in Brooklyn was like no other world. Every time I think back on it, I look on it with greater fondness each time I think. It was a culture that was unique. Brooklyn was unique. I grew up in Bensonhurst from 1943 until I left to go down to Miami to break into broadcasting in 1957. I left Brooklyn, but Brooklyn didn't leave me.
I grew up in the Bronx, Decatur Avenue between 211th Street and Gun Hill Road on the 6th floor of an apartment building with 85 other families. It was a vertical existence. We never went out, we went down. We never returned, we went up. Maybe that's why I feel at home in an elevator. The hall smelled of pie baking in the afternoon and boiled chicken in the evening mixed with the scents of hundreds of people.
There were the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Giants, stickball, Coney Island, the Grand Concourse. But for thousands of families, anticipating a trip to the mountains made them wish that summer was already here.
When it got hot in the summertime, there was no air conditioning. And most of the Jews, when it came out, couldn't afford it. The fire escape was the only vacation they could afford if they couldn't afford the Catskill Mountains.
Seemingly in the middle of nowhere, you'd come into this lush palace filled with your own kind of people, escaping the city in the summer heat.
When I first saw the Catskill Mountains and the hotels and the trees and the greens, it was quite impressive.
The heat wasn't up here. I'd see things that I really hardly ever saw in the city. The only time I'd see grass is the once or twice I was in Yankee Stadium.
In the Borscht Belt, in days gone by, where the Catskill Mountains kiss the sky.
It was the Borscht Belt, the sour cream Sierras, the right stuffing, the end of the Derma Road. The highest peak in the Jewish Alps was Grossinger's Hotel under the reign of Her Royal Highness Queen Jenny Grossinger. Tanya Grossinger grew up there.
In April of 1945, this 8-year-old kid started on a life adventure that at the time she would never have any idea where it would lead her. This was the most exciting thing in the world. Grossinger's had 850 acres, its own airport, 2 golf courses, a fully stocked lake with rowboats, 12 tennis courts, an outdoor Olympic swimming pool. It had an indoor swimming pool. At its heyday, catered to 1,100 guests and an almost equal number of staff. I walk into the dining room for the first time, and I can have anything I want. I saw men running around in uniforms, yelling, "Front!" all looking as if they didn't know where they were going.
There's an awful lot of kooks in this hotel.
The people that we know are not just the maitre d' or the bell clerk or the concierge person, but they're Tom and they're Lenny and they're Barry and they're, you know, it's people that you got to know. It's very friendly. It's what the Yiddishkeit calls the Hamish feeling, very Hamish.
There's a feeling that you got in the Catskills that you never got anywhere else.
Women would wear dresses and fur stoles, men in suits and ties.
The Catskills was almost like the Champs-Élysées. It was like the French Riviera. To them, it was the ultimate vacation of all time. No Jew at that time ever went back to Europe because they just came from Europe. So no Jew would say, let's go to Europe for a vacation. That's where everybody got killed, and that's where everybody was escaping from. So they didn't think of going there. They just thought of thanking God I got out of there.
All year long they'd slave and slave and slave. For that 2 weeks holiday they'd save.
So now the Catskills became the haven for Jews in the summertime.
In the Borscht Belt in the days gone
I learned that the first thing is you go over and say hello to the guests. The second thing is you try to feed them.
Oh, those great meals fit for a king. And they double order everything.
When Europeans, like my mother, came to America, food which had been so scarce in the old country became a kind of affirmation.
I mean, where'd you get 3 meals a day, plus whatever the people wanted to stuff in their handbags?
A guest would say, give me a little of this on the side.
Well, it was a good place to eat because you could eat 25 times a day.
Catskills specialized in lots of food. There was a great song Mickey Katz made once called Essen, which means eat. It's called Essen, Migay and Essen.
Essen, Migay
And everybody was eating and drinking, and they had tea rooms for 2 o'clock in the morning where Jews were still eating.
Migay and Essen.
Jews never finish eating.
Let me put a word in your vocabulary. Yogurt. How about this word? No, I couldn't eat more marble cake.
We're serving 3 meals a day, 7 days a week in a 110 Fahrenheit kitchen with alcohol and tattooed jerks behind the counter going, "Pick up, I kill you, you son of a bitch!" And they never learned your name, so they called you by what your order is. "French toast, pick up, getting cold, you son of a bitch! Hey, you too, potato pancake, I kick your ass too, eh?"
Busboys lived for tips and developed mini-acts, routines to gain favor with the guests. They were the dining room entertainers.
I performed while I worked, and I was a good busboy. Trust me. And I made a ton of money as a busboy.
I just have to mention that the hotel owners, from Jenny Grossinger to Helen Kutcher and all those in between, had one thing in common. They personally greeted all their guests and they welcomed you. You felt like they really cared about you, and they did. They wanted you to be happy. They wanted you to come back next year. And so many people did just that. They came back. Now let's get back to the food. What I believe the #1 activity of every hotel. And it wasn't, the activities outdoors that people were going to. It was the activity in the dining room, the most important place In those days, sugar, sodium, cholesterol, calories, they didn't exist. Just the pure enjoyment of all that wonderful food. So take a look at this.
You'll get Essen, 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 Essen.
Chances are, if you were one of the millions of people who visited the Catskill Mountains, you didn't come home hungry. Food and lots of it were the watchwords of the mountains. But how much is a lot? Joel Siegel tells us in his special series, Memories of the Catskills.
Roz, in its heyday, the Catskills spent more money on entertainment than any place in the world, but they spent more than that on sour cream. 6 main courses on the menu, order them all. I won't say I did that, but after lunch one day they told me I was the guy who put the gross in Grossingers. And it's true, food makes up most of our tastiest memories of the Catskills.
Waiter, I don't eat like this at home. I don't eat like this. And she's sitting on 2 chairs while she's saying.
Some of it's because of the way the Catskills started. Family farms taking in boarders at the turn of the century. The food was served family style. Fresh eggs and milk were hard to come by in the city. Second, sure, you're part of the family. But somehow, things got carried away.
Heringbootsarre kamen with bagels and logs. Heringbootsarre kamen with stinken Heinbahn.
You get a menu when you sit down, and the menu lists 7 juices, choice of 4 soups, 4 appetizers, 7 main courses, and 8 desserts. And if you want one of each, you can have them.
In the dining room, they look at the menu, which was always lots and lots and lots of stuff, and they'd say, yes, we'll try it.
What of each? It's different today. We know it's just not healthy to eat that much, so Catskills patrons and waiters have become masters of psychology.
Why don't we split something? I'll have a half of yours, you'll have a half of mine, a half here, a half there, because I couldn't eat a whole one.
And when you can't find someone to share and you want a taste of a main course, have a little on the side.
They'll have 2 pieces of fish, and they'll have the blintzes for a side dish, or the pancakes for a side dish, or an eggplant for a side dish. They always eat, I would say, an average 3-4 main dishes.
Al Shiner has been a Catskills waiter for 43 years.
So you better eat something. You didn't eat it, otherwise we're going to send you home on a bus.
He's at the Raleigh, and what's for dinner? Gefilte fish, matzo ball soup, brisket of beef, chicken, steak, veal, fish, 8 desserts, fruit soup, that's to start, not dessert. Borscht, well, it's the Borscht Belt, and don't forget, something for later.
They take the Danish and put it in their bags, or the rolls and put it in their bags, yeah. Like Mao Z. Lawrence used to say, for later, for later.
No, these are not for now. We have for now. These are for later. We'll have these with coffee February 23rd.
Sunday breakfast, which, if you play your cards right, can run into Sunday brunch, which is soon Sunday lunch. And just in case you get hungry in between?
Whitefish aside, just a side of whitefish. Just bring the side of Moby Dick out here.
The dining room at the Concord, the size of 5 football fields, can hold 3,000 people. The guy who built it, the joke went, wouldn't be happy until one of his waiters could shout at a guest, "Sorry, that's not my state." Some of the reason are the dietary laws. You can't mix milk and meat. But the real secret behind Jewish cuisine is poverty. This isn't food people ate. This is food people dreamt of. In Eastern Europe, Jews were so poor, breakfast was black bread and a radish. If you had a radish, if you could find a piece of black bread. But this is America. This is the Catskills. It's on the menu. It's included. You eat. At the Concord, they break 70,000 glasses a year, which doesn't include weddings, and serve up 20 tons of sour cream a year, which doesn't include concerts.
I was doing the barber sigil at Figueroa area, the barber. So they had a guy, a poor waiter, they put him in a chair with a thing around him. And I had to walk out with a bowl, not shaving cream, sour cream. So I walked out, put sour cream on this poor guy's face with a razor, and sing the Barbara Seville.
And after the show, on a long walk to the room, you can bet the waiter wished he'd saved some for later.
Sour cream, yes, a big bowl. Big, we love it, a big bowl. The Super Bowl, bring the Super Bowl out here.
My favorite Catskills joke, a guest says, the food here is poison, and her friend says, and such small portions. The Catskills spawned 1 million jokes and 1,000 comics to tell them. Tomorrow we'll meet the funniest and the most famous. Memories of the Catskills, where the 3 little words that set everyone's heart aflame were breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
By the way, After eating all day and all that food, the minute the late show ended, everyone rushed to the coffee shop because they were
starving.
As far as the nightlife goes, the shows in the nightclub were just unbelievable. All the major singers and comedians played, all the hotels running back and forth to the early and the late shows, trying to make extra money. And remember, everything was included. You never had to pay for any of these shows. And as a hotel staff person, we got to go from hotel to hotel ourselves. And we went to watch all the great shows. And this was known in those days as hotel hopping. So we were very lucky to see all the sensations.
Check all of the gas lines.
I don't know what just happened, but I will say, though, that the Catskills legacy is evident in almost every contemporary comedian today. After all, this was the beginning of stand-up. So let's take a look.
You'll get Essen, 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 Essen.
It was known as the Borscht Belt, the birthplace of great entertainment, where some of America's best-loved singers and comics were discovered. Who were they? We'll find out as Joe Siegel continues his series, Memories of the Catskills. Joe?
Greg, regulars at the Concord, where big acts still play what has to be the biggest nightclub in New York State, would pride themselves not on how many acts they saw, but on how many acts they walked out on. This was the toughest audience anywhere. Catskills comics knew if they could make it there, they really could make it anywhere, and dozens did. America's funniest, tonight's Memories of the Catskills.
I brought him into the office. And I questioned him and questioned and questioned and questioned and questioned and questioned. And why? Why is he so sleepy? Why? Because he's tired.
Sid Caesar got his start in the Catskills, a 17-year-old clarinet player. Jerry Lewis got his start, a 14-year-old waiter. He dropped a stack of dishes during a religious service in the dining room, shouted, "Oh, God, I'm sorry." Even the rabbi laughed.
Why are you worried to run a string?
I told 30 jokes already. Pick out one.
Jackie Mason was a rabbi, and nobody laughed. When he got started, more than once he had to run off the stage into the woods to hide. All these comics worked the mountains. It was a place to start, a place, if you were lucky, to become a star.
I'll never forget my first appearance with Danny at a place called Green Mansions. I'm sure that's when Danny started to patter. Because I was doing Figaro.
When Paul Hay gets starts to picking, when he's making with the shaking, apple paper starts to paper on the floors. Then who's the man they call on when they cannot get the Paul? I'm the man in the red flannel drawers.
The Concord would have Billy Eckstein, Perry Como, big names. Tito Puente.
People love to dance to Latin music, the mambo, the cha-cha, the merengue, and all the Latin bands used to play up there in the Catskills during the summer.
The Catskills spent more money on entertainment than anywhere else in the world. In the 50s, 170 different hotels and bungalow colonies booked entertainment, a singer, a dance team, and a comic.
In the Catskills, you could actually do 3 shows a night. They had it set up so that one hotel show started at 9:30. You finished that, ran to the second hotel, the dance team was on. You would do a 10:30, and then you would do a 1 a.m. show at a bungalow colony.
I'd open the show in my place. I were paying me board and food and so on to go to this other place. I'd knock off this other date for $10, come back, climb through the window in time for the finale of our show.
Everybody lied about how much money they got, by the way. Everybody would add another $5 to the price. Yeah, what'd you get? I got $40. I thought you were getting 35. Oh, yeah, I mean the 35. But this time they gave me 40. I did so good the last time they gave me another $5. Yeah.
Up in the Catskills, this was the place. For a guest, Grossinger's was like staying at the Ritz. For an act, Grossinger's was like playing the Palace. Grossinger's had its own post office, its own airport. And celebrities, Debbie Reynolds came here. Elizabeth Taylor came here. Unfortunately, they both came here with Eddie Fisher.
If I ever needed you, I need you now.
Grossinger's PR department used all its muscle to make Eddie Fisher a star, but yes, he could sing. And the mountains were known for 3 things: entertainment, food, and romance. Thousands of couples met and married in the mountains. For some, it really was love at first sight. Neil Sedaka was so young when he was hired to play piano at the Esther Manor, the owner thought he was a busboy. As for the owner's daughter,
He said, "My name is Neil Sedaka, and I just wrote a song for Connie Francis called Stupid Cupid." And I said, "That's ridiculous. I'd never know anyone that would write songs." But that week I heard Stupid Cupid on the radio, and I decided just couldn't make that up.
Being at the Esther Manor Hotel, all of the old guests called me Soupy Stoopy because they couldn't pronounce Stupid Cupid. So it went, "Stupid Cupid, you're a real mean guy. I'd like to clip your wings so you can fly. Hey, hey, set me free. Stupid Cupid, stop picking on me."
Wonderful people, wonderful story. They're still happily married, and a wonderful song. And if you call it a love song to the Catskills, Monday we'll be back with another love song to the Catskills, to Grossinger's Queen of the Catskills, at one time America's most famous resort. Novelist Mordecai Rickler called it.
So we're just about finished with our presentation, but this four-part series on Eyewitness News with Joel Siegel was filmed back in 1992. So he's still referring to Concord Hotel as being open, which it was. It lasted several more years. Now we're going to finish up with a piece back from when comedy went to school. And in this one, we're going to see those two hotel representatives speaking again, Helen Kutcher, as well as Tanya Grossinger. And they're each talking about what it was and what went wrong. And the three A's are going to come into play here. So pay attention to what the A's are, various things that brought the hotels down. And then you'll see the closeout with Robert Klein. Thanks, Larry.
A lot of the hotels didn't survive because they didn't have what the public wanted as the years went by.
And RCA air conditioners are backed by the research and engineering skill of RCA.
You could now go to London and to Puerto Rico and to the French Riviera. One of the attractions of Grossinger's in many of the hotels in the Catskills was the daughter could meet a nice Jewish boy, the son could meet a nice Jewish girl. Well, the daughters and the sons didn't want to travel with families anymore.
Now many former guests could afford homes with pools, join country clubs, send their children to summer camps. Even the legendary Catskill menu changed. 7 choices of herring for breakfast were replaced by granola.
When I got married, we had 456 hotels. That's a long time ago. And now you've got a token us.
It was a very sad picture. It was a very sad moment for people who worked in the Catskills. In fact, at the Concord, I tell people, I came on, I was a comedian. I walked off, the guy said, "Congratulations, you're a partner." They went bankrupt in the middle of my act.
The Borscht Belt season was Memorial Day to Labor Day, late May to early September. Hotels would shut down and prepare for the winter. Guests would go home. This time, most would not be coming back.
As I said in the description of our workshop when we sent it out to you, the things will never be the same in the Catskills as we knew them. It doesn't mean new things can't come and replace it, but the only thing that really is staying the same anymore is the mountains. The Borscht Belt is a bygone era, and it was something that was very important to many people, and we're hoping to hear from you very soon. But right now, I'd like to thank you for staying with this part of the program. Sam Loria is going to be talking. He is representing the new Catskill Museum that'll be opening for the Borscht Belt era in Ellenville. And Sam is a recent graduate of Rutgers University. He has done many things since. He's studied and worked at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. He's also working with the Department of Jewish Studies at Rutgers. And I think he's going to do a fine job with the new museum, working with their collections and managing many of their projects. So Sam, welcome to OLLI, and we're looking forward to hearing some things about what's coming up in the next year or so.
Thank you so much, guys, and thank you so much for having me. And hello, everybody. So great to see all of you, and thanks for coming on. So as Jeff and Diane said, I am Sam, and I'm the Collections and Programming Manager of the new Catskills Borscht Belt Museum. And let me, got some slides to show you guys with some fun images. So here we go. This is our logo, the new Catskills Borscht Belt Museum. We are in Ellenville, New York, just down the street from the old Nevele Hotel, so right in the heart of the Borscht Belt. And here is our building. We're in the old First National Bank building in Ellenville, which has a little part of the history of the Catskills. It was one of the only banks to offer loans to the Jewish owners of a lot of the hotels and bungalow colonies. So we're very happy to continue that legacy in some way. And on the right here, you can see this is our pop-up exhibit that we were very excited. We opened it up in June of last year, and it was supposed to go just through the summer, but it was so popular, we extended it all the way through November. And we have lots of great memorabilia from the Catskills. Here's a couple highlights. We have our little mini Kuchelain exhibit. So you might have had a similar fridge or stove like that in your bungalow colonies or in your Kuchelains. And on the right, this is a giant sculpture we had an artist do of one of course, the viewfinder keychains that were such popular souvenirs at all the hotels. But as we say at the museum, the borscht is yet to come. We are just at the very beginning stages of the museum. We had our great pop-up exhibit. We had our amazing Borscht Belt Festival this last July. You might have heard about it. We had thousands of people up in Ellenville for a food and music and comedy festival. And that'll be coming back this year, which I'll tell you about a little bit. But the borscht is yet to come. This is what we're hoping to look like in the next year. We're planning on beginning construction in August. So on the left, you see the outside of our building, and we're going to build a whole new floor. And there's a giant basement we're going to turn into an event space and hopefully build a restaurant and have lots of great shows and bring back a little bit of that famous Borscht Belt entertainment. And on the right, you could see our exhibits on the inside. We're really hoping to make a state-of-the-art museum. Now, if I can tell you one quick, I think really fun story about the museum and how excited we are about bringing back some of the flavor of the Borscht Belt. On the left, you see way at the top of that picture, we have the original Kutcher sign that hung above the entrance to Kutcher's, which we're really proud to have that in our collection. But when we got it, it was unfortunately not working anymore. The neon had died out, and we couldn't figure out how to fix it, but we were still happy to have it, so we hung it up. But one day, I'm working at the museum, and this man on the right, Billy Rosenblatt, walks in. And he looks up and he sees the sign and he says, "Hey, you know, I'm actually the former Neon King of Long Island, and I think I can maybe help you with your sign." And we said, "All right, you know, let's give it a shot. We don't know what to expect." And after that, almost every single day for weeks, Billy came in with a little toolbox, and he would climb all the way up to the top of that sign, super high. You know, I'm scared of heights, so not for me. And he'd tinker away at the sign until one day, a few weeks later, he fixed it, and it's now beautiful and glowing again, and a great testament to that amazing time. So thank you to Billy and just these amazing people we get to meet through this project. And if I can share a couple quick things we have coming up with you guys, I can announce a couple fun projects. One of them involves the Nevele. So as I said, we're right down the street from the Nevele Hotel in Ellenville. It was one of the big major resorts of the Borscht Belt era. And it's still standing. It's one of the few hotels still standing, but it is closed and it has been abandoned for many years. So it's in very poor condition. You can see kind of the before and after there. You notice most of the windows are broken and there's graffiti over it. And here is the famous Stardust Room in the Nevele where all those great comedians performed. And the before and after, you see it's in very poor condition. But the Nevele was recently bought up by an organization, and they're trying to bring it back into some sort of hotel or resort. But as you see, the building is in very poor condition, so they're going to be demolishing it. But before they do that, we are partnering with them to save some important artifacts from the museum. So there's a big marble sign for the Stardust Room that we're going to be bringing in and some artwork. So that is really exciting, and we hope we can, again, preserve some of the memory and the legacy. Another great project we're working on is this bungalow. So it was really incredible. A man reached out to us who lives on a former bungalow colony in Kerhonkson, and he has a house on this property. Then all these bungalows are still there and still standing and practically untouched since the 60s. As you can see, the old wallpaper and the stove. So he has offered to donate this bungalow to us. So the plan is to bring it right to the side of the hotel, to the museum, as you see in that picture, and we can have a little walk-in bungalow, and you can walk right back in time into the bungalows and see how they were back in the day. So that is really exciting, and I'm happy to share that with you guys, and hopefully you'll see that in the near future. And one final thing, which is really exciting that we're starting right now, is our oral history project. So for all of you who have amazing memories of the Borscht Belt, we want to record those memories and make sure we can show them in the museum so that future generations can also hear those great stories you have. So we have an oral history project. We had started it at our pop-up exhibit, interviewing people in person, but we are now proud to announce we're going to be launching a virtual version of that. So all you'll have to do is send us an email. We'll send you a Zoom link, and we can record you over Zoom, over video call, with audio, with video, and then get your stories preserved in our archives for all time. So any great stories you have about comedians, or if your family owned a bungalow colony or a hotel, please reach out, and we'd love to hear your story. And just before I go, if you want to learn more, please visit our website. Very easy, www.borschtbeltmuseum.org, or you can reach out to me directly. I'm Sam at borschtbeltmuseum.org. And I'd really love to hear from you guys. And we're really excited to hopefully bring back a little bit of the Borscht Belt. And the very one last final thing is Borscht Belt Fest, our big, as I said, food, music, entertainment festival, will be coming back this year on July 27th and 28th. The last weekend in July. So make sure if you're in the area to stop by the festival. It should be a really, really fun time, and hopefully bring back some great memories. So thank you guys so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, thank you, Sam. That was terrific. And please, keep us in the loop with your emails, because I'll send it out when we do our showbiz class in the spring semester. We'll make sure that we send it out to the members and make it available if they're interested in going up to the Catskills. Now, as you know, and we're going to take your questions if you have any comments and thoughts about your lives in the Catskills. We have a couple things going on up there now, Sam. I know that next to the Neverly, I believe the Falls View is still sort of in business and a different life.
Yeah, so the Falls View is still there. It is now called Honors Haven, and it's not quite the same, Borscht Belt tradition, but it is still standing. And we do encourage people, if they're coming up to the festival, that maybe they can stay at the Honors Haven and relive some of that.
Right, and the Raleigh Hotel is still there, but it's now an Orthodox resort, I believe.
That's right. Yeah. So some of the hotels closed, some of them are abandoned, some of them have been demolished, turned into condos. But a good number of them are also still standing, but turned into kind of other things. So some of them are now Hasidic Orthodox hotels. There's some that have become kind of spa center hotels. So a little bit is left, but again, the museum is really hoping to preserve the legacy of what was and to maybe bring some of it back.
It was nice to see the Neverly, because Jeff and I actually went there on our first date.
I signed up for this, the Stony Brook, through Stony Brook. They have.
Go ahead, Arlene. I can't hear you. Nope. All right, anyone else have any thoughts about, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, a very good presentation, guys.
Thank you.
I had an Irish friend who, a few years back, I haven't seen him in a couple of years, he took a trip up to the Irish Borscht Belt. Was there a parallel universe going on beside the Jewish Borscht Belt?
Absolutely.
Yes. In fact, we had, I don't think I have it in front of me, but when we used to do our Catskills comedians or Catskills semester-long workshops, which only really worked well on campus because we only used copyright DVDs. There was one about the Irish dancing and the Irish Borscht Belt, which was a little higher up. I think it's more in the area where Mrs. Maisel filmed her episodes. That was up around Deposit and some other areas. But yeah, the Catskills had, and just like Villa Roma, there were Italian sections too. And
yeah.
Everybody appreciated and loved the mountains, and we all had our fond memories. Unfortunately, the generations that followed are now going to water parks, Legoland, casino. Not that anything wrong with those things. It's just not. Right. In no way is it the same thing.
Right.
Len,
okay. Can I say something?
I'm going to get right to you, Rich, in a second. Let me go to Len. He's waiting, and I want to hear you. You had a great story about
Yeah.
your marriage. Go ahead, Len.
First of all, there were Irish Alps, there were Italian Alps, there were, and as well as Borscht Belt, but there was nothing quite the same as the Borscht Belt. I mean, it was unique and it was different. And I can remember Marie and I, my wife and I, first trip there. It was kind of funny because my father had just passed away a few months before, and I was kind of in a funk. And two of our very good Jewish neighbors, couples, said, "You got to get out of this. You know, come to me. We're going to go to Grossinger's." And so, we said, "Okay, let me get out of this funk." And so we go up, and it was a Friday to start with a weekend, and we're at the check-in desk, and all of a sudden a bus pulls up outside the hotel lobby, and a bunch of people get off. And the first thing that comes in is all of a sudden I see my wife's uncle walking towards us, and my wife's uncle happened to be the venerable of a Sons of Italy lodge in Soundview in the Bronx. Okay, and he had booked this entire group, 50 Italo-Americans, walking in for Grossinger's for the weekend, never knowing that we would be there. We didn't know he'd be there, and all of a sudden was surrounded, okay, by all of these people, because we knew most of them from dances and things of that nature. And it was an incredible weekend. Of course, it was Shabbos. So I mean, the first thing they did was they complained about the food. What the hell is this? What the hell kind of food is this? Of course, they ate everything. Okay, and the wine. This wine is so sweet. What the hell are they drinking over here? They drank it. Okay, by the end of complaining for 2 days, all they wanted to do was come back next year. So it just shows you how much there was in terms of sharing. That it didn't matter what your ethnicity was, whatever. It was just home, and it was just a great place to visit. And I liked it better. We were in Rockland County, so it was easy for us to get. We lived in Rockland County to the Catskills, and we went to the Nevele and the Concord and all those. But nothing beat Grossinger's at the beginning.
Thank you so much for sharing
that story. I love that.
Hi, Rich. I know you've got a great story too about your how you met your wife.
Yeah, I met my wife at Camp Chippewa in July. We got married in December of the same year. Okay, we used to go we went to the Nevele, we went to the Falls View for a year each, and we went 7 years to Kutch's. Okay, after that, we used to go to Monticello. The best restaurant there was Kaplan's, and also the best steak place was the Old Homestead in Bridgeville. That was another great place. And one of the things he didn't tell you, the Concord now became the Cartwright. Okay, my kids took us there for 50th anniversary. That was my son, my daughter, 5 grandchildren. What it has there, all indoors. They have a water park. They have laser tag. They have zip lines. Okay, everything is not money. It's all credit card. And the only thing attached to the room is the water park. Everything else is credit cards. And they have a gigantic game room. I mean, it was unbelievable what they did with it. And it's all indoors. So you could go there any time of the year.
So, Rich, just a question for you, because I'm glad you're sharing that, for those that would like to go up with their kids or their grandkids. I guess the mountains are still just as beautiful as they always were, right?
Yes, and the reason why we knew about it, because my son is athletic director at Camp Chippewa, and the Concord is not far from there. So my wife and I met, so he actually drove us there, gave us a blanket that said 50 years, blah, blah, blah. So it was just a nice vacation.
That's great. Okay, go ahead, Paul or Thelma, whoever.
Yeah, my family had a place in Ulster Heights, which is above Ellenville. And we were across the street from a hotel called the Sunrise Manor.
Mm-hmm.
which we used to sneak into every weekend night and watch the shows. My uncle had a place further up with a general store and a couple of bungalows, and he was there for decades. He used to go up and down that mountain in a Model A Ford, which towards the end had a chicken wire roof. We were about halfway up the mountain from where he was, and the engine mounts rotted out twice. In which he said it wouldn't start, so he opened the hood, and the motor was on the ground. So he go up and down the mountain about 3 times a week.
They weren't easy.
No, they were definitely
They were not easy.
They were treacherous, a lot of accidents. But,
Yeah, well, I had an uncle right nearby who had a place. I don't know. He was there since I guess the early 40s. He raised the family there. His son got to be a millionaire, and he lives in Dallas, Texas now. So this was a guy who was lived into his late 80s. That part of the family always lived long lives, and we had a place across from the place called the Sunrise Manor. We had 68 acres of blueberries.
That's great.
And the whole place was family.
Right.
People stayed there, all family.
That's what Paul, that was, I think, what was so nice about the mountains. Like I mentioned earlier, I had the Chagrins family and the Wassermans family and the Rodemans and the Selicks. The families as a group, I guess maybe this was something from their Eastern European heritage, but they came and they sort of set up shop as almost like a family compound in the form of a small hotel or a bungalow colony. And it was something that was passed down from generation to generation. Now, did anybody else in our screens have an experience in a bungalow colony? Or also, if you think about some of the movies we've seen, because Diane and I were, talking briefly about it, we went to late shows. Usually the help couldn't make it to the regular show, or you weren't really welcome. For instance, like at the Neville, they wouldn't let you in the gates in the beginning of the evening. But by the late evening, people who were our age at this point, the older people had their early show. They were tired. They wanted to go to sleep. The help from that hotel and other hotels were the lifeblood for the late shows because they were the drinkers. They were the staying up late people, even though they had to get up very early in the morning to serve breakfast in the dining room or pick up the day camp kids. But we were, for Lenny Bruce, for Joan Rivers, who really is the Mrs. Maisel prototype character. These people usually they thrived on those late shows at the hotels. And it was a very important part of them making money because, let's be honest, you make the most money at the bar.
And I have to say also, these people, all the entertainers, and especially the comedians, they would gather in the middle of the night at the Red Apple Rest.
Yep.
They'd all sit and have coffee, and they would talk about, I did that joke, and you did that joke, and I stole your joke, and they would even actually be online with you when you were at the Red Apple. You could see entertainers because that place everyone went to. With the very wealthy and the not so wealthy, it was just the only place. So everyone went there.
The person that we saw quite often, Tanya Rosinger, in her book, which is very interesting, and in the longer version of what we saw when comedy went to school, she talks about how, you used to go to shows sometimes and you knew the punchline already from a comedian. You probably have gone and seen some of these clips of, for instance, driving my mother-in-law to the airport, that's a pleasure trip or whatever. She worked out a deal with the people at Grossinger's that used to perform there and said, look, people are going to get up and walk out on you if they've heard your jokes too often. So she would take notes in the back of the nightclub on a daily basis and sell her notes to the comedians so they would avoid being walked out on or booed or heckled or whatever.
Because they already heard that.
Yeah,
joke.
the audiences at these iconic resorts were extremely tough. They were New Yorkers. They weren't, you know, the calm, maybe Vegas crowd. They were a very different breed.
Happy they just left.
Yeah. Some people, you know, talked about the doors. How many doors in the back of the nightclub open for you? And that was a real thing, especially at the Concord. They had 4 doors. If you were a 4-door comedian, you probably weren't coming back. Len, did you have another comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, we have some more.
Len, I just wanted to grab Len. He set his hand up patiently.
My cousin married a waiter. Well, a lot of these places had basketball teams, softball teams, all filled with college guys who off season were athletes. And you didn't mention the fact that a lot of the times during the middle of the week, all these guys would get together and take a ride to Coney Island.
Yeah. Thank you.
After they did the meal, and they'd come back at like 3 or 4 in the morning, get up and serve breakfast. So
it was amazing. I don't know. I guess we were young. We had the stamina. Carol, go ahead.
Yeah.
I had a different experience because I was 18 years old and they used to have singles weekends. And we were very naive and we were always late for dinner because what would happen is the boys in the building would say they were running around naked. And we were afraid to go out of the building until it was all quiet. And one person on our table was looking at all the desserts they had, and under the desserts it said maitre d'. So she ordered the maitre d' thinking it was a dessert. And what happened was the maitre d' came over and said, "Do you want me dressed or undressed?" And of course we were very embarrassed.
I have something to say about when I was at Kutcher's. Dolph Shays was there with the older Maccabee team. And I was sitting there watching, and one of the players got hurt, and they only had 10 guys, and I was 9. So I offered to go in and play. And when I did, Dolph Shays asked me, "How come you didn't try out for the Maccabee games?" I said, "I didn't know anything about it." So that's what happened to me there.
Also, you know, Rich, you picked up on an important thing that's part of the Welcome to Kutcher's video. The Red Auerbach and many other famous people were up there on a regular basis. In fact, even the boxers, Rocky Marciano, Floyd Patterson, Muhammad Ali, they all trained up in the Catskills. That was the in thing to do in those days. And
well, they also had the Maurice Stokes game there.
Yes. And Will Chamberlain, as a high school kid, was a bellhop, and he was so tall and so obviously so big with such an unbelievable reach that they showed him handing the luggage through the second floor windows. He didn't have to go in or up the steps or in the elevator.
Oh, Larry Fine
He was tall enough. Larry, what do you got? What do you remember?
You just mentioned athletes up at the hotels. My family stayed at the Pines Hotel, and I was a kid. And one dinner time, my father said, "Let's go over to that table over there." And who was sitting at the table? Rocky Marciano, who was the heavyweight champ at that time. I got his autograph, and to my dismay, I no longer have it, but that was great.
Well, you know, a lot of the hotels hired basketball college players. I could have played for Grossingers because at that era, in the late 50s, hotels used to play other hotels in basketball because that's what the people like to see. So in that era, all the hotels had very good college players play for them in that era.
Thank you, Rich. Now, getting back to some of these stars and people that were there, any of these hands still up for the sake of being up? Len, are you back in or not?
Just to say, no, I didn't see any mention of something that we all ended up playing as kids, Simon Says. And I remember that was introduced at Grossingers, I guess. I can't remember the guy's name. I should remember, but I don't.
Lou Goldstein.
What was?
Yeah, Lou Goldstein.
Lou Goldstein, right.
He was actually, there was a little picture of him on one of the little clips. There was something, but it was very brief.
I can remember, I mean, he would get groups of 50 people. It's unbelievable. Everybody wanted to play. you know, and he'd fool everybody, you know?
You know, if you watch, I'm glad you bring that up too. If you watch Freddie Roman, who recently passed, you know, he was the one who put together the Catskills on Broadway. He makes fun of the fact that, you know, our crowd, after a big meal, would go out by the pool, maybe do a couple of these and call this, you know, working off breakfast. You know, they would do one or two things. You know, maybe Simon Said was considered, you know, a
Exercise.
heavy workout. It's time for lunch now, you know, but
But you know, I can't tell you how many, there are really a lot of different clips. We had to leave a lot of things out. We tried to get a little bit of everything in, but
this was a little bit more historical than, you know,
There
we would normally do in a class,
a
you know,
lot of
regular
things.
workshop. But, you know, we're happy that people can relate to it. I see
I have a-
Karen nodding her head a few times too. Actually, Karen used to go to the resort near where my cousins Murray and Daisy had the Planet Sunshine. She was at the Brookside.
Not only that, Karen was kind enough when we did our Catskills class to speak to our class, and she had a great presentation. So did you want to say something?
Any
Karen?
fond memories of that?
Well, yeah, the reason I didn't speak up right away, I'm actually in Westchester. My granddaughter is sitting next to me. She's home from school with a cold, but she loved hearing about it. And I told her some stories that we did take her mom once or twice when she was little, really young. But the Brookside, it was wonderful. I remember, well, as I told your workshop years ago, my father would drive us up, my brother and I, my mom. He'd stay with us the first week. Then after that, he'd go home, you know, on Sunday night, and he'd work, you know, in Brooklyn, and then he'd come back Friday night, and he'd spend the weekend with us. And usually it would be for 4 weeks over the summer. The very last time I went was actually when I had aged out of sleepaway camp, and I was not quite old enough to be a counselor yet. So that summer was memorable. I hadn't wanted to go, but I made a lot of friends among the counselors and the waiters, and it was a different way of spending the summer, and it really was fun. It was a great place. I loved when my aunts and uncle would come up, and my favorite memory, and then I'll give someone else a chance. My dad, my uncle, they were all big eaters, and the way they would order, you know, sometimes, you know, cousins would come up too. Everybody would order. Whoops. Everybody. Oh, I shut up. My granddog. Everybody would order one dinner and then one for the table. So we'd end up, just as they said, you know, everybody had 2 dinners. It was a great place to spend family time.
Or 3. You know, just one of the quick thing, Liz, just want to make sure we're not having any problem. Are we okay with the?
I just wanted to ask when you get a minute to explain the bungalow colonies.
Okay, I'll come right back to that, but I want to get back to the thought that Karen just brought up, only because this is a personal thing. So my cousin had the hotel just up the hill, around the bend and up the hill from the Brookside that her family was going to. There was a fire at the Brookside one Passover. I don't remember if it was a residence. It must have been a residence area. And what happened is my cousin Murray allowed their guests to stay at his hotel and still get their meals back in the dining room at the other hotel as a collegial feeling between hotel owners, because I think they all realized, you know, that they all needed to stay in business. It was good. Often, if one filled up, they sent the overflow to the adjacent hotel. They had like it was competitive, but it wasn't cutthroat like today's society is.
Right. Liz, I'm curious to know, what would you like to know about the bungalow colonies?
Well, I don't know what they are.
Okay.
Yeah, I just hear you guys talking about it, so I was just curious exactly what they were.
I'll tell you, there were 2 versions. When I was very young, we went to a place that was called a Cuchalane, and that meant that everyone had a place to sleep, but the kitchen was communal. So my mother and all her girlfriends and all the children and the husbands, everybody ate together, which was very nice. There were many stoves, many sinks, that kind of thing. And then the bungalow colonies were more just little individual bungalows that had little kitchens in them and bedrooms in them. And then you'd have like a communal, kind of, they call it a casino, where you would go and have some, any entertainment or shows or things like that, and a pool. So it was just really a little cottages. That's how I would describe them. But it was a very communal feeling, being with everyone.
The best way, Liz, the best way to find out, or even if you can just get clips, I don't know if you can bring the whole thing up or if you get the video somehow. Walk on the Moon is a terrific depiction of, it was at the time of actually, the moon landing, but it shows how the life was in a bungalow colony.
That's the truest depiction
Yeah.
of a bungalow colony. And then the truest depiction of a hotel is the Sweet Lorraine. If you get a chance to get that movie, it's called the Sweet
The
Lorraine.
sad thing is, though, as we've done these classes and we've researched all these movies, almost none of them are true to the Catskills. For instance, Walk on the Moon, which is a very true reenactment of what a bungalow colony is like or was like, was filmed in Canada.
Right.
Dirty Dancing was filmed on the North Carolina-Virginia border. Mrs. Mays was actually deep, right near the old Woodstock grounds of upstate New York. So that hotel closed during the pandemic. It's gone, what they called Steiner's. The only one that was real was the Hayden Hotel, which they had to reopen after it had already closed to film Sweet Lorraine. And that is probably the truest movie you can find for the Catskill life during the Borscht Belt era, and it's with Maureen
Wait, I
Stapleton.
see an old friend up there, Roger.
Yeah, I
How are
think,
you, Roger?
and Mike I'll be back to you in a minute. I know you're getting patient.
You struck a memory when you mentioned Walk on the Moon, the movie Walk on the Moon. The star of that movie was a 61 Studebaker.
I thought it was Diane.
That's what the family had. But it was a wonderful movie. It was a very interesting thing. The time of, huh?
I know where your head goes, straight to the old.
Yeah, right. The old. But speaking of the Catskills, growing up, I didn't even know about the Catskills. My family wasn't into that. I first learned about the Catskills because of Sheila. Sheila knew about the Catskills, and after we were married, we started going up. And my favorite hotel was Grossinger's. Such a variety of things to do. The entertainment was fantastic, and the food was also fantastic. And of course, Lou Goldstein with Simon Says. Nobody did it better than Lou Goldstein. It was fantastic.
Right.
We also like the Homowack. We also like a lot.
Yeah, I would highly recommend, that you get some of those things. You can get the feed for nothing, right, Larry? We can get the either off the internet, YouTube, or PBS. You can get the entire When Comedy Went to School, which also shows their life and growing up. And we're not concentrating on the comedians right now. In fact, I think Alan Goldman's going to be doing something with comedians next semester, which will be great. But the thing about these hotels was they had so much going on. One quick aside.
Right.
I don't know if you can still remember, they showed a picture of the Stevensville Hotel and how spread out it was. So was the Homowack. I was a bellhop, and believe me, when you were schlepping those bags up through these endless corridors.
They did not have wheels. There were no wheels.
Yeah, you're right.
Not an easy job.
The luggage was totally a different thing, and you would get if you're lucky, you got a couple dollars for dragging 6 bags for a family.
Right.
I mean, truthfully, when you worked in the dining room back in those days, you think about when you go out to eat now, you go to the diner, let's say over here. You're probably leaving it, you're getting, the bill is $50, $100 for the family, or for, a couple people, or a restaurant is $100. You're probably putting down a $20 bill, at least. When you worked in the Catskills for 21 meals, you were lucky if you got $20 for the week.
Yeah.
Well, times were different. It was,
but
those people work very hard.
Luckily, my tuition at Chapel Hill was very cheap. I think I paid $100 a semester or something. But the point is, you were really not being compensated well. But on the other hand, we saw that little piece about Grossinger's, the farmhouse, and they turned a profit, they said, of 80 some odd dollars for the season.
Right.
I did the equation on the computer, and it came up to like $2,000, maybe $400, something like that. Not terrible, considering they probably were losing, a lot of money prior to that. Mike, have you got something? Thank you, Raj, though. Mike,
Okay.
something else?
Yeah, it's just resurrecting old memories, and I thought I would share one with you guys.
Sure.
If you have the time.
Not too long, but short. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. We went up several, as families, before I was married, my folks would go up to the Concord probably annually, maybe twice a year. And so I got to know it then. And then there were periods when we stopped going. And then after we got married, we were close with several couples, and we tried to get together at least once a year. And the decision was made early in the thinking that we would go to the Catskills as a group. So I think 4 or 5 couples would go to the Catskills, and we did that for several years. And it's very interesting because these people are not here anymore, and for various reasons, and it's very touching. And I would just share one story that I love to tell because it makes me very happy. It may fall on deaf ears here. We're wandering through the Concord. We had just taken a long walk, which we did. I don't know. We were young, but we still went out for walks. And we walked into some of the main dining rooms, and we walked into a room that was setting up for some kind of occasion. And we were kind of tired and kind of hungry. And we walked by, and on the table they had already set up the watermelon filled with fruit. So we're walking by this watermelon. I see that looks really very good. Well, I don't know what got into us. We said, let's steal the watermelon. So we stole the watermelon. We hid it under our coat, went up in the elevator, try not to look too obvious, got it into the room and kind of celebrated. And we ate this stolen watermelon, whatever. It was delicious. And it provided us and me with a great story and a great memory to remember all of these guys I don't see anymore.
That's great.
That's
Thanks for
pretty
sharing
cool.
that. Larry, you had something else?
Yeah, I went as a kid with my parents, but then when I was an adult, a young adult, and married, my wife and I went with 3 other couples to the Nevele for a long weekend in the winter of all times. But they had toboggan slides and indoor swimming and ice skating. 4 of the people that we were away with are longtime OLLI members who I lost touch for years and re-met at OLLI. That's Paul and Linda Nell and Fred and Bunny Averill.
Yeah.
Wow.
We connected at OLLI. So
Oh, that's a beautiful story. That's
Yeah.
special.
Yeah, I remember that is great. Many people had not just lifelong memories, but lifelong friendships. It's true. You're my friend.
I know, you too.
But anybody else quickly? I know we're running way over, and we're happy that many people could stay with us. We appreciate everybody's contributions. We got many notes. I think we responded to most of them. We thank you for sharing those stories. And like I said, some people couldn't make it today. Let them know that it will be. Liz, when will it be available on demand?
We'll be putting it on our YouTube channel, but we'll be sending it out. I don't have a date, but hopefully, by the start of the semester.
Okay, great.
Okay,
right.
thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you guys very much.
Larry
Great job.
Thank
Really
you.
good.
and Sam, thank you. Good luck with
Thank you.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
guys.